no spoilers. It's not really like, I mean, there's like one thing that you learn, but
Yeah. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Average Bros Gym podcast, where your hosts with eerily similar names, Croy and Corey, sit you down and talk you through life fitness advice. No polarizing takes, no black and white takes, no.
views.
No. Did you say no views?
No black or white views.
Oh, I thought you meant like
That's
no
what
views
it
and
is.
like y'all don't get views on this.
No, that's not what I meant. I meant like takes or views.
I was gonna say that's pretty fucked up, but yeah.
No.
But you have not listened to the latest episode 28. You haven't listened to it yet.
No, and I feel like Mr. Ballin has been taking over my life, so it's hard not to listen to anything. I haven't listened to any of the other podcasts that I normally listen to either, because I just throw on Mr. Ballin and then go.
I know that feels
do whatever
like
I'm
you're
doing.
trying to get caught up on something, and so like all the other shows that you have that you kind of listen to like periodically, like every week or something like that, they all kind of like go by the wayside. But that's nice because then you're accumulating more episodes of those shows.
They're easy to listen to, I guess,
Yeah.
but I don't know. Maybe you're right. Of my chokehold on murder and crime podcasts really aren't super healthy, I guess, for my own brain.
I mean, again, they're like positive things for it. So if you don't know what we're talking about, Mr. Ballin is he's a YouTube creator as well as the podcaster, like a lot of digital stuff. They do a bunch of different things. He said in one of his, I was listening to an episode actually the other day, and like one of the ad breaks, it was like, yeah, we've got like, they have a whole team now, 40 people working for him, run like, doing this stuff. So,
well, his podcast is a part of Wondery.
Okay.
Which is a large network of other podcasts like
Sure.
Morbid, and he has two other he has Strange, Dark, and Mysterious, which is like his main one. And then he has Medical Mysteries also, which are like all medical true crime stories. I haven't listened to that at all.
So if you're interested in any sort of true crime or just kind of interesting stories, because he has a couple that are not even really like, you wouldn't even say they're a murder. I mean, they're a murder mystery, but they're not kind of that typical
Well, they're
court
Strange,
TV.
Dark, and Mysterious.
Oh, okay. I was just talking about the general podcast I've listened to was like, a guy goes up a mountain and he is dead, but they really don't know. Anyways, they're mysterious in a lot of ways, and some of them are less like grotesque or gruesome than others.
They have like a spooky element to any of them, and I think he does have like a soft spot for like outdoors stories. I feel like I've never listened to another podcast that's covered as much, besides Park Predators, but that's covered as much on like hikers or people that go like wandering in forests and things like that, and then something happens to them.
Which is great for me to listen to because I enjoy hiking a lot, so that's always nice when I'm like, oh, stories. Cool, yeah. But so that's go listen to that if you haven't yet, or go watch one of his videos on YouTube. But yeah, that's been kind of our current obsession. But another current obsession or current just watch that we just finished up was of course, America's Sweethearts, the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders special on Netflix. And that would be an interesting topic to talk about, not only because of our kind of love of like reality television or documentary television, but also kind of like, I mean, it's definitely tangentially, not even tangentially, it's associated with like health, wellness, and fitness. I mean, you're talking like world-class dancers. So let's talk about this. So you have a background in dance.
Yes, I do.
And so we watch it for similar reasons. Obviously, you have a little bit more of like being able to look at what they're doing and
like technically,
versus I don't know what they're doing at all, but it looks good, and I like the behavioral dynamics of things as well. Of like, why
I think it's a good show for anybody, and I think social media has kind of made that loud and clear that even if you aren't interested in the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders or in dance or in cheering or performances or whatever, like they're all just people, and like each of them, I do feel like later on in the episodes, besides like the first and the second one, they're like making the team, do go into like deeper sides of the actual women that are on the team and like what's going on in their family. Like there was a lot of sadder stories that were going on behind the scenes than them just like smiling and cheering on the sideline signs.
So if you don't know, Dallas, the America's Sweethearts is a Netflix special. It's a 7-part like documentary series. I think the episodes are right around an hour, maybe plus long. So go check it out if you haven't yet. But we're going to talk all about it. So spoiler alert, I guess, for the maybe if you've already seen it, you're going to be tuning in and listening to this. Or if you're like, hey, I'm never going to watch it, but I want to listen to a fun conversation, then you're in the right place.
Or if you're seeing things on social media and you're like, I don't understand, I think this will give you like better context of why Victoria blew up, or why, you know, you're seeing the same 3 or 4 cheerleaders now doing everything on social media.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the social media reaction to it, because by and large, you said that it's been kind of like almost glorifying it, which is, if you've watched the show, it's very much not glorifying the conditions, like what's happening. I think it's a pretty objective take, to be honest, because you're seeing a lot of like really cool positive things that these girls experience, like a lot of, especially like the community and the camaraderie aspect of it.
That's the biggest thing for them, is the community and the friendships. I mean, and obviously they love to dance and have a passion for doing that. But I would say before we watched it, actually, I had known and seen like, oh wow, like everyone's talking about this and how cool, how cool the cheerleaders are. And like, I kind of knew the history because there's a reality TV show on CMT called Making the Team about the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders, like that's been on for like 10 years. Like
CMT is country music television, which would explain why I never heard of it until until like the last week.
Yeah, and the show was basically just about like who was making the team and like, the tryouts, and more like day-to-day reality versus like a documentary like this, where it was looking at like, wow, this is what goes into each season of.
It follows storylines throughout, and actually, let's start at the beginning. So you grew up doing dance. Did you know about the Dallas was that a thing, the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders, like in your circle, even before this, like long before this this series came out?
I don't know if I remember like ever talking about it with like friends in school, but I guess I didn't know until more recently that the cheer team has like almost like a dance team tryout. So I was in dance team all 4 years in high school, tried out in college and actually didn't make the team, but still continued dancing. And then I had a double foot surgery done and kind of stopped after that. But I grew up dancing, have been dancing in a like tap, ballet, jazz, did pointe all throughout high school, also up on, the big blocks of wood in the ballet shoes. And I think when you compete and when you dance privately, like you kind of get to know, oh yeah, there's these big teams, and University of Minnesota dance team is like one of the teams that I looked up to when I was growing up because they're so good. And they compete every year in Disney World at the UDA Nationals amongst all these other dance teams. And then a lot of those college dance teams, they'll go on to try out for NFL cheerleading squads. So like the Vikings cheer team also has somewhat of an element of like a dance team-esque to it.
They showed like kind of the initial batch of tryouts, and one of the judges was, I think, the head coach, or kind of the head maybe dancer, the person in charge essentially of the Vikings dance team
or the Vikings cheer team. I didn't know when I was in high school, it was so separate. Like the cheer team was one team and the dance team was another team, and the dance team danced and the cheerleaders kind of did like more stunting type things. We didn't do any like stunt pyramids or, lifting. We did lifts, but not to the extent that cheering was. And I would say I had the impression that it was mainly just cheerleading until maybe a couple years ago when I was like, oh, these people actually have to have like solid dance technique to even try out for any of these teams. Like even the Timberwolves team that we saw, like granted it's a little bit like different than the Dallas Cowboys, like you still have to have a good solid dance technique. It's not just based on the foundation of like stunting and cheering and doing a flip and a cartwheel it's not like tricks. It's more like, do you have rhythm? What is your flexibility like? how technical can you get? Because we watched a lot of times on the documentary where they're like, nope, I can see in the kick line somebody's toe is just slightly off. Like, you have to be really, really technical with it.
Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like what you grew up seeing, what you grew up kind of looking up to. I mean, we've also seen, like, when we had the dance nationals, we were watching those videos
the UDA
on YouTube.
Nationals, that's in Disney World every year. Yep.
So go look at those YouTube videos. Those are really, really impressive. But so
University of Minnesota wins like almost every single year.
Yeah, and there's some really good. I mean, there is what LSU hip hop.
LSU is also very, very good. Yeah. Each team, you'll notice, like, comes into their own style. Like LSU and I would say, like, a lot, like, this is probably a generalization, but a lot of like other Southern like schools focus more on like their technique with hip hop style and palms versus like jazz, versus Minnesota focuses a lot more like on jazz and like lyrical and technique that way. Like LSU had a super cool, like, Smooth Criminal Michael Jackson routine this year that like was like, whoa. And it was like a throwback hip hop routine. It wasn't like some of the routines that I've seen in the future or in the past from them.
Sure. So movies like Stomp the Yard or Step It Up, or Step Up, sorry, not Step It Up. How accurate are these movies?
Step Up is pretty accurate.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of those dancers are really, really, really talented. And I just want to emphasize too, like, I went to a dance class for the first time like several months ago, and you have to, like, I had forgotten how hard it is to pick up on choreography as fast as you do. We even watched that in the documentary. They have to know, like, what was it, over 50?
They have to know so many routines for one
sidelines.
Game. Because you were saying that, okay, there's okay, we can get into it deeper, but basically there's 4 different, once the team is all set, there's 4 different kind of groups.
Yeah, because they all stand on different ends of the field.
You have a group leader edges. That essentially has to group leader has to pretty much each group has a leader, right? And they kind of have to communicate with the other leaders, but also communicate with this music. As soon as this DJ is playing these songs,
they don't have to communicate with the other leaders. They just have to communicate with the other girls in their pod. So the DJ for the game has like 70 plus songs that they can choose from to play during, breaks and blah, blah, blah. And their job is to basically just get the crowd rowdy and also like do a dance that like makes sense with the beat of the music. So like they hear the first 4 to 8 counts of music and they already have to pull something out of their head choreography wise. And then they'll do like a call off to like whatever that is. And all the girls need to be paying attention to what that call off is so that when they start, they all have to start on the exact same move at the exact same timing. And we did that in dance team growing up. It's called sidelines and they call it the same thing, I'm pretty sure. But each group has a leader that's like constantly on the entire game watching what's going on. And then they perform at, I think, every home game, some sort of routine that they've learned, whether it be Thunderstruck, whether it be, I think they only do Thunderstruck during their opener game.
Yeah. So Thunderstruck, just so you all know, is like, that's kind of a through line throughout, is like, this is like this really famous choreographed dance.
Yeah.
That the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders have been doing for generations.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really intense dance. They've got like the high kicks. They've got the, like, I don't know what they call it, but they all kind of lock legs and then they do their bow kind of in like a big wave formation. Ripple. And then, yeah, like the big move is like they jump, split, and land.
In the splits.
And yeah, it's interesting. So like, it's fucking painful. But so
they talked about all their injuries throughout
and that goes back to kind of what we were saying earlier, is like, okay, so from a large scale view, the documentary is pretty objective, because it does show these, Caroline, I believe, this she essentially you get like a 5-year period to try out and make the team, and once you're done 5 years, you've done, right? So one of the women they follow around, Caroline, she has a younger sister, Anna Kate, trying out, and Caroline, at one point, the beginning of an episode, is like she's winning this award, and you see her get up and immediately go to crutches, because she has had like hip surgery, and so it's like, this shit is taxing, and like it's not easy to do. And if you look at like the rate of injuries in sport, actually cheerleading, and this is kind of probably more for like, competitive cheerleading where you're doing lots of pyramids, throws, things like that. But the risk of that is very high for injury. And so, like it does do a good job of showing that like, hey, this isn't like sunshine and rainbows. Like these girls are working incredibly hard, being incredibly diligent in their craft, and like injuries can and will happen. It's a fucking lot to put someone through. So kind of the show starts leading up to tryouts, and it's like any other documentary. They pick kind of a handful of women to follow, and they talk about kind of their stories, and they'll go into depth a little bit. And some of these women that they're following in episodes 1, 2, 3, they don't even make the team. So it's kind of an interesting format that way. But you definitely get like emotionally attached. At least I know I do.
Well, you start to see people's personalities come out. There's been a lot of kind of controversy on one of the characters that's very like wholesome, not characters, one of the people, not a character, person. She's very wholesome and like not, I don't want to call her naive, but she's kind of like, she's just young.
Yeah, it seems like she grew up in a not strict, maybe not a strict environment, but yeah, more sheltered
environment.
She's in college and hasn't dated a boy yet, and the first boy she dates, they're married, they get married. So it's like,
well, and she's 21, 22,
went to Alabama, or went to Alabama. I think she was from Florida, maybe, I'm not sure, but she was a cheer for Alabama, University of Alabama.
She was on the dance team.
Yeah, she was at a basketball game, and that's how she met her now husband.
Most of those girls were all on dance teams, not cheerleading teams, and that's another interesting thing, kind of correlating to what I talked about before, is they come from this strong dance background. So, but yeah, she is immediately like picked, I would say, within the first episode. I feel like we saw her and met her. And then there's a variety of other characters. I would say it was hard for me to watch some of those first girls go home. And we talked about this and like ask Kelly and Judy, like, is there any way I can stay, or kind of like beg a little bit for a spot? That was like, especially uncomfortable moment of like, oh,
they do so like the first kind of round of tryouts is essentially the women are doing something they've picked, so they can do their strength.
They're doing their solo.
They're doing their
solo.
And so like from there, people, and this is the group of like 15 judges who are
hairstylists.
Some of them are qualified to judge, and
most
some of them are not. Yeah. Like there's a fucking meteorologist, and like the
guy that owns Lucchese boots.
There's there's the guy that has like a fitness health.
Oh yeah, I don't remember his name.
Yeah, Kevin. It's Kevin Cook, and I know that because I grew up reading his stuff. Actually, Fit Men Cook was his. I don't know if he still has it, but it was his kind of organization. They make him look bad, and I feel like it was kind of just like the one time he was judging someone on like their face, and they probably just clicked it and caught it, and like, you shouldn't do that shit. But I feel like, it's always tough when it's like you get 4 lines in a program, and then one of them is like you bashing a woman for her facial structure. It's like, oh no, it doesn't look good. But yeah, so it's like the judges have various credentials. A lot of them are not dance judges, but what they
judge you like 20% on your dance skills, I feel like, if you're good. And then I feel like the rest of it is like if you can shine, like if you can make a really good impression with your hair or your costuming or your makeup or your facial expressions.
They call it the it factor. It's like you could be the greatest dancer in that group and you might not make the team. Because
even if you're very technically trained or have been doing this for most of your life and your solo has been like executed and you've been practicing it for 2 years, if you don't have that,
sure,
you're not.
Well, and so the girl that we were kind of discussing earlier, kind of this very wholesome Alabama dancer, she I think she's from Florida, but I know. Anyways, she was one of the strongest technical dancers, in your opinion.
She's very good.
Yeah.
And she's very, she catches on quick, it appears, from what we saw. I don't know actually. She catches on quick, and she is very fluent in like a lot of dance styles. Like you can just tell. Like she could easily go from her solo, which was very like contemporary jazz lyrical, to like Palms.
Sure.
And it like wasn't a big deal. Like she's just, and you like, your eyes are like drawn to her. She's like super gorgeous, pretty, and like you just, she's like knockout pretty.
And just so we all know, when Meg says things like contemporary and jazz and palms, I have no idea what she's referring to. But I just know I just know the dancing looks nice, and so I'm like, oh yeah, it's interesting. Okay, cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of different types of dance.
Yeah.
Especially in like dance team world.
Yeah. So she's the mastermind. I'm just kind of like I'm trying to imagine what she's picturing in her head as she's saying this. But
the routines that they always do are palm routines.
Yeah, because they've got pom poms, right?
Palms, and they're all like palm dances. Like they're doing ripples, meaning like one group goes off, then the next group goes off, then the next group goes off. Because with palms, it looks really cool. Like there's certain tricks and styles you can do with palms, and everyone needs to be very technically like, somebody can't do their arms in like a Y position and a T position in the same part, because with palms it's like so noticeable. You can like see white palms in their hands. Like it's kind of like I told Croy the other day, like in high school we did a glow stick routine that was like super fun, and like people loved it. People would just freak out because we'd come down from the bleachers with glow sticks, and we'd flip the lights off, and anything we would do, because you could see it so clear, looked so cool. And palms is kind of the same way, of like anything you do, that's why everything needs to be so like technically, like someone's foot can't be flexed, someone's hands can't be a certain way. You have to be doing the same arm formations, because with palms you can like pick it out in an instant if somebody is off position or off kilter or at the wrong time. Or with jazz it's different story. But
yeah. So they continue on. Like, I mean, they continue on. Obviously from that first solo, a handful of girls get selected, and I think it's, what is it, like 80 something, maybe 100, because they end up cutting down. The final team is 36.
And I think there's only like maybe 40 to 50 selected for the solos.
I think more girls go to camp. I think it was like 80 that were in camp, wasn't it?
No.
Really?
Mm-mm.
I thought it was.
No.
I could be wrong. We should go back and watch. I guess we could.
I don't think so.
But so a bigger selection of girls gets to go to camp, right? And then from there they cut them down.
I'm gonna look it up
emotionally, and in terms of the team. So like
training camp.
A couple of the things that kind of have come up with this show is that you have these two women that essentially run this Dallas Cowboy cheerleader group, right? So this group is really famous over a long period of time. I didn't really know that it was a big thing until the show, to be honest. But apparently they're like kind of the best of the best, right? They're very, 45. Very good. 45 go to camp, and then from there 36 make the team. And there was controversy. And then there's also Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones is the owner of the Dallas Cowboys. He's a very famous owner, partly because of how eccentric he is. Not in terms of like looking weird or doing crazy things, but just like he's always involved. And it's like, really? It's Jerry's world, Well, he wants to have the biggest thing, but the stadium tour they showed
seems weird.
They've got like 1,000 TVs all over the stadium. They've got the biggest thing. It's typical Texas mentality. Yeah. It's like, everything's bigger in Texas. Like he embodies that. But his daughter, Charlotte Jones, I think she
sucks.
She kind of runs the team. Essentially, she oversees the team. It's Judy and Kelly who
were previous Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders. We also learned that throughout the documentary, that there's so much history and tradition in this, of like everyone's moms did the team, and then now their daughters are their sisters, and their
it's like legacy for like sororities, you know what I mean? Like
it's very much like a sorority, I would say, very close to that, with dancing involved.
Sure. And like so you have this kind of triumvirate of I love saying that word, of people that are kind of like overseeing this team.
I don't even know what that means.
It's like from Rome. Anyways, so it's kind of like trio, but yeah. So Judy is kind of like the choreographer. She's the one who like designs these choreographs these routines. And
she's
then
like number 2.
Yes, and Kelly is kind of like she's kind of like the, I don't know what you'd call her.
I think she's the head coach. That's what I would call her.
Like the head coach of it. Like she's kind of seems to be the one that takes more of the responsibility as far as like making decisions, as far as actually engaging with the crew. And then Charlotte Jones, who is kind of like the overseer. She's kind of like there was a moment in the show where the previous year in 2022 there were 37 girls selected, but Charlotte is like no, we need 36. Like that is how it's always been. This is
even though they wanted to have a 37th person this past season.
Basically at some point in the show they have to cut down to 36, and it's like there are 2 girls who are like, they're right there, and neither Judy nor Kelly really want to cut them, but it is kind of like it's an awkward scene. It is kind of like a tense scene.
Because she's like, well, I really want to do it, and then Miss Boss herself is like, no, you need to do 36.
Yeah, but she kind of does it in like almost like a
go ahead.
It's almost like a TV drama.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It is a drama, but you know what I mean. It's like it's very
really bad for the girl that got cut because she was shorter.
Yeah,
short girls unite.
Yeah, there at a moment there was one of the girls is cut basically because she is
shorter than the rest of them.
And there's a big debate because Charlotte's kind of saying like, well, she looks small, and Judy and
well, she says something meaner than that. She looks like a child, she said, and I was like, okay, the girl's probably like 5'5". Like, does she really look like a child? I don't know.
And
like
Judy and Kelly are sitting there like, well, should we have do we have a height requirement? Like at last I checked, we don't. And then Charlotte's like, well, no, but it's like, and so it's kind of one of those weird things, and it's crazy the cameras are in there. And so that's kind of what gets me is like these interesting moments between these people, and I'm like, man, I'm just like, it creates this interesting dynamic in the show. But
wouldn't you love to be a fly on the wall in that behind the scenes moment?
Yeah. And so it's like, so they follow these girls around, like and what's really cool is like they'll, some of the girls they picked obviously didn't really make the final cut, but they still follow them around. The majority of the show takes place before the season begins, because they're like
the first like 4 to 5 no, probably 4.
They skip pretty, like when the season begins, I think they kind of go through pretty quick. It's almost like season 8 of Game of Thrones, where or Game of Thrones in general, where it's like okay, we need the characters to get here to here. Awesome, let's go. I know you have no context for that. That's okay. You're not missing much. So I mean, they skip ahead really fast through the season, but you do see some interesting moments. But yeah, I mean, like that's one of I think probably the coolest part of the show is like the actual dancing is really interesting to me, who again not even a dancer, but it's like just seeing what these women are able to do is really impressive. And then but just following along these characters, I mean, you learn like so one of the group leaders, which is pretty much she's like the de facto kind of leader that they follow, Kelsey. She's in her 5th year, so it's her final year with the team, and she is like she's a nurse, so she said she works like 7 a.m. to
works normal day hours, and then following that. And they mentioned that because I was waiting for them to mention that in the beginning of like, do any of these girls work jobs or how does this happen? And then they were like, yeah, most of us work full time during the day, and then at night we go to practice every night. I mean, I remember doing that in school of like, you do school all day and then you go to practice at night and you're done at 10. Like that was most of my nights too, of like, I wouldn't leave the school sometimes from 6:45 in the morning till 10 at night.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just roll into the next day. Okay. You know what I mean? Like as adults, I think obviously it gets tiring versus in high school, you're only in high school for a short period of time and you're still a teen / young adult.
And the mental capacity for like working a day shift at like a hospital is probably different than the mental capacity needed.
She works even harder than I would imagine at a hospital because she's working with a bunch of pediatric cases. I feel like throughout her day where she's traveling to people's homes, it appeared, I don't know what she's doing now, but it looked like she was caring for various different peds patients in their home, is what it looked like to me, which was probably even more taxing.
Yeah. So you see, like, these women have jobs. I mean, one of the women that's trying out for the team is what was she? She wasn't a dentist. She was like a
orthodontist.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like these people have, they've all got. It's interesting. At one point, they kind of get them into kind of like a film room, and they kind of cut between the women saying what they do for work or what they've like majored in, and it's all like really just it's crazy to see. You know what I mean? The amount of like scholarly academics coupled with kind of their skill in dance. Not that should be surprising, but it's just kind of cool. That's like you get the sense for how important this Dallas Cowboy cheerleader, they call it the DCC, how important this is as a cultural thing, because it's like, orthodontist making a ton of money, but she's still like, I want to be on this team, and they're fighting so hard to do it.
Friends with a bunch of the other people on the team. I don't think I even told you that. There was a day that I sat and explored through everyone's Instagram pages, and she is, because they all have their headshots, so like you can easily tell who is a cheerleader by the fact that their headshots all have them in their cheerleader outfits. So there was a girl though that threw a surprise party for her husband. And Anisha, the person we're talking about, was like there, and I was like, okay, they're all still friends with the girl,
which is a really cool thing. You know what I mean?
I can imagine that. Let's talk Victoria. Are we ready to talk Victoria?
We're ready to talk Victoria. I do want to preface it with saying, like, in no way are we like criticizing, or
no, we're not.
In no way are we like, what is the word for when you're like trivializing any hardships that this person is going through. I want to make that very clear, especially a health and wellness podcast, like very, very sensitive to that. But yeah, no. So Victoria is one.
I was going to go back to what you said on no, it's okay. On the part where they were all talking about like their like degrees.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that was hard for her to watch, because she said in the show that she hasn't gone to college, and she feels like she's really behind everybody else because everyone else did go to college.
Sure. So like, let me set the scene. So like, Victoria is one of the women they follow from pretty much day one. And she she tried out 1 year, did not make it. She was on the CMT show, the Dallas Cowboy, the reality show.
Well, she was on that show, and I think she was followed along in that show, starting even further back in her history, because
she's a legacy. Yeah.
Her mom is also very good friends with Kelly, the head coach that we were referring to of the team, or, our name for her was head coach of the team. And her mom and Kelly and, all of them family wise grew up together.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly like came to her recitals and stuff, and like was like a very close family friend. And she tried out in 2018 and did not make the team. And that was clear. They flashed back to that in this documentary on the CMT Making the Team show.
Yeah. And they show her not making the team. They kind of show some like unflattering images of like her makeup kind of everywhere. But that's just, the reality TV show is like you're trying to capture the most
eye roll.
Yeah. You're trying to capture the most dramatic moments. So
that poor girl got caught in like the worst. That was such a cheap. It's like when like paparazzi, where you're like, that's such a cheap shot, pal. Like come on.
Zoom in. Yeah. Oh, and it makes them money. That's just the life of it, unfortunately. So she doesn't make the team. Then she comes back the next year, makes the team, or she takes a year off, then comes back. I forget.
I think she's a fourth year in the documentary.
But it's only her second year making the team.
I don't know.
She took a year off.
She did take a year off, she'd be like
gap year,
second or third or something.
So I think it was her fourth year trying out, but her second year actually on the team. So, and just the way they present,
you only get 4 times to try out, though.
I think you get 5 years total. So it doesn't matter if you make the team. Like if you make the team in your 5th year, like that is your last year. I believe. So
you can try out 5 times regardless, and if you make all 5, great. Yeah. And if you don't, then you don't. They only get 5 tries.
They were essentially saying that Victoria like could come back for her 5th year, but that was her last year, even though she would have only been on the team for 3 years fully. Yeah. But I think
so you must only get 5.
Yeah. Which I feel, I mean, like maybe that's fair. Like if they're like, yeah, we've seen enough in 5 years, because they're all
people, they want to see other people get a chance also.
So like, and she's shown to be this like kind of DCC like super fan, like one of the.
She's in her bedroom with all of the posters and
all the
pom poms, and she's got her shirt on, and
her mom is also wearing DCC stuff, and and so it's like it's definitely I don't want to say it's a cult because it's not a cult. It's definitely like I think
they're really really into it.
Yeah, I think it's just a big cultural thing, especially people that live in the area. I'm sure, right? So like they follow Victoria, and it's kind of clear from the onset that like she's not the strongest dancer. They kind of are saying that she's like off for whatever reason. I think some of the kind of like critique of the show has been more geared towards like Kelly and Judy for kind of like their words about girls while dancing.
They're really tough.
They're very tough. Yeah, they're very tough critics. I never got the feeling that it was like purposely harmful in nature, but just that they were just had harsh words, but it was just like more like that was just how they graded them. So Victoria's kind of like
they're just very particular.
Yeah. And I think Victoria honestly probably got more of a microscope because of the relationship with Kelly. You know what I mean? I think maybe that's part of it.
Because Kelly felt more comfortable like looking at her in that sense of like, hey, your hair is off, or your eyelashes are too done, and that's why, which is like
because she's known her forever. So but yeah, like, and it's interesting because as the show progresses, like you see Victoria, like one of the things that got me kind of like emotional was like they kind of paint her as like a little bit of an outcast. Like she's not really engaging socially a lot with the other girls. She's not building the same relationships as they are.
Or so that's how the show makes you think that it's happening. I bet she's
probably fine. Yeah. Well, because they kind of make the idea of like, oh yeah, like, well, she's a fourth year, but she's only been on the team. This is only her second year on the team. So they're kind of like, well, she's a veteran, but she's also not really she doesn't know the same people that, she would have if she had been on the team every year. And so they're kind of like making it a little bit, that's kind of the angle they're taking. Because again, whenever you're watching something, you have to realize they have a, as I know I said it's really objective, and I think it is for the most part, but obviously they have an angle for people, right?
They know that going in.
Yeah. When they start talking to the girls, they know. So Victoria is like kind of painted this in this part, and then she's also they're also kind of discussing things that she's doing as far as like her energy levels and things like that, and like her stamina is a big thing. And the some of the other girls, I remember they interviewed Kat, I believe, and Kat was saying like, oh, Victoria took this time off away from DCC,
and she was like
so way happier.
Yeah, she looked so awesome in terms of like what she saw, I'm assuming, on social media and what she was hearing from other people, but like or herself, or Victoria to herself maybe, but the show follows her, and yes, makes her kind of appear as an outcast, and makes her kind of appear, I would say they even pull some angles of like, you kind of get the sense of like, okay, she's really extreme. She's really into this, to the point where you're like, whoa.
Sure. And you kind of see her go through some stuff in the show. And you definitely see her like fluctuate a lot in like her health, and like you can see like her kind of like change things over time. And so in the show, they're very strict on like they're very very strict on body image and like bodies. And that unfortunately is how they do things. And you see that.
That's why I didn't love when people were like, I felt, and maybe they weren't, but I felt it was kind of glorifying the fact that these people were commenting really harshly on people's bodies, and like that not everybody looks just like that in that outfit.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a big focus on body and staying a certain way and looking a certain way. And you definitely see some of the girls, like, I mean, you just see changes over the course of the time, and you see Victoria. And I think like for me, one of the really cool things I saw with Victoria was like they do these like community outreach events where they're visiting like
a nursing home.
Nursing homes, right? And it was just because
kids and blah blah blah.
And part of the show is like, hey, it's not just they're not just going to games. They're doing like a bunch of like events. They're doing shows. They're doing concerts. They're doing all this stuff. Like they're so busy. And what was really cool though is that they showed a couple of instances where they're doing these community events, and Victoria was like front stage, front and center. Like I'm getting kind of chills talking about it, to be honest. I don't know why I'm getting emotional, but like it was really cool to see that
she's so comfortable.
She seems so comfortable just talking to people, engaging with people, and it seemed like she
wasn't
was like
forced. It wasn't like, it
was so interesting to see like them talk about her being kind of like not as much around the girls. Then you see her in these scenarios, and she's just like it just looks like that's what she's meant to do. You know what I mean?
Well, we all knew, I think, by the end of the show that was an unhealthy. I'm not giving away any spoilers, but we all knew that it was just a really unhealthy relationship for her, I think. And I mean, man, I told you when we watched the last episode, I'm like, this is just, it's like watching your best friend like go through like a bad relationship and being like, get out of this, girl, just leave, and then, watching your friend like beg for this dude's attention again. It's like, oh my God, just go, just go. You're so much happy without this person. Why do you continue to keep going back? But I'm sure it like, has the same science behind it of somebody that is in a bad relationship and they continue to still stay in it for various reasons. I'm sure she still wanted to be a part of it because of a lot of different reasons, but probably similar.
Yeah, it felt like at her core, she was looking for the approval of these women and didn't ever feel like she was receiving it. And
the validation and love, true, yeah. She wanted to be somebody that all the other girls were looking up to as like a role model and kind of lead the team. And she's, in their eyes, that's not how they saw her.
And it's a heartbreaking moment when kind of towards the end of the last episode, at the end of the season, the girls are eligible to come back, or even girls that can't come back.
Spoil it.
Yeah, but so there's essentially 2 racks of the jackets of the outfit, right? And they're like, oh yeah, if you're gonna try out again, like put your jacket on this rack. If you're not gonna try out, put your jacket on that rack. So they go through all the girls, not all of them, but they go through a decent amount of girls and about like, doing that. And the scene where they get to Victoria, I won't give anything away, but it is the longest by far,
super long,
of what they were showing. Like it was a very much like a tough moment to watch, because you really get that from Victoria of like why she's doing this, and you're like, man,
it's a frustrating scene for me to watch personally.
And I know you were very frustrated. I was a little bit more empathetic, because I think I've been there where it's like I think we've all been there. We want the affirmation from like one party in particular, and we just cannot get it. And like the hoops that you go through and the things that you do in your brain to justify like trying to get that attention, maybe I can really do this, tough.
Or, if I just do this, then I can have this. It's like,
yeah.
And I feel like they were completely honest with her.
You could tell they were uncomfortable.
They were uncomfortable because it was like, again, I'm going to use the boyfriend example of like, it's like when you're like begging somebody to like, well, why can't you tell me this? Or why can't you do this? And they're like uncomfortable.
What did I do wrong? Kind of feeling. I mean, yeah.
They're uncomfortable. And there's almost, again, that anxious avoidant attachment of like the boyfriend's trying to like, stop, kind of that same pushback from an avoidant person. Was what you could see that Judy and Kelly were doing of like,
yeah,
hey,
And I think like, let me move this a little bit.
Thank you.
I can like there. I think you had mentioned that on social media there's some discourse of like essentially the attitude that like, oh, they did Victoria dirty or whatever. I think you mentioned that a couple times.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very like quick take on it. I think there's a lot more nuance to it. I think no one that's watching that show can see the relationship that they've had throughout her 20 years of life and then make a judgment decision based on that. I don't necessarily think they were doing her wrong. I think they I think they had an idea of what she was capable of in their heads, and I don't think they were fully comfortable telling her that, to be quite frank. And I think a lot of that was personal. I think Kelly,
because of their relationship.
I think Kelly is a lot more like, I know she was very harsh. I know she said some very questionable things about body image and bodies in that show. And you have to remember that, again, they're clipping things to make it a show, right? But like, I think she was a much more sentimental person than
she
would
very
appear. I think she was
soft,
really,
in quotations.
yeah, I think she was really struggling with this idea of like reconciling, like, I've known this girl her entire life. I don't think she's going to be like, I can't guarantee. You know what I mean?
She's not a lead in my brain right now.
Yeah, like I think they were coming to that realization of like, she doesn't, not that she doesn't deserve to be here, quote unquote, but like they weren't going to have her on their team. You know what I mean?
She also went through a lot. You could tell in the years that led up to the show and during the show, and may still be going through things right now we're not aware of. And I think maybe they thought like, we want somebody leading the team that's really rock steady. Like, yeah. Kelsey was so strong, she just held her own and had that very leadership-esque sense of her. You could just tell she was like, kind of like, anyone that was like going through anything, all of a sudden you'd see Kelsey come into the pain. There she is, no matter who it was, and just talking them, down. And she comforted that one girl, Klein, crying, and you could tell she was like everyone's like confidant, and also like their friend, and also their mom, and also their sister. Yeah. And she was that role for everybody, and also led the team, and everybody, I feel like, looked up to her as a role model. Her exit was especially sad for me.
Yeah talk about that a little bit.
It kind of reminded me of when I left. Well, not when I left the team. When I left the team, I was my dance team in high school. I was like, okay, everybody, peace out, see ya, bye. When I was a senior, I was just really, really checked out and done. But when I when I was in high school, I had a bunch of flipping them off, a bunch of senior girls on my team left the year before me, and I was always friends with girls that were older than me. In high school, I had a couple friends in my grade, and a couple of friends below my grade, but I really, really enjoyed hanging out with people that were older than me when I was in high school. And so these girls I had formed like a sisterhood with, and when they left, I was devastated. I just could not stop crying. The entire last performance that we did together, I was like sobbing, on the sidelines of like, I'm never going to be able to do this again with them. And it's really sad. Like, I get why they would cry at the end of the season, because none of you get to dance together ever again. Like, it's like a travesty of like, wow, we had this short time together. Or when I was in high school, 9 months of our school year was all dance season. It wasn't like in the winter we stopped dancing or in the summer we stopped dancing. It was 9 months all throughout school. We started summer practice and we were done probably in like May.
Yeah.
So it's really sad. But also, I do think a lot of the women that they showed have now a chance to form new passions, and that's life. That's life, man. You lose passions because of an injury or because of various other, maybe it's finances, maybe it's a change in your relationship, maybe it's a whatever it is, and you have to grasp life and keep going. You can't just like, well, I lost dance, so now I don't have anything. It's like, okay, you have to find new passions, you have to find new hobbies, you have to find other things that you like, that you can channel your creativity and your time into, that isn't just dance now. And that's hard. And they talked about that too, of their identity is so wrapped up into this cheerleading team, that for 5 years you do it and you give it all your heart, and then you step away from it and you're like, who am I?
Yeah. And one of the core themes of that show is definitely the community aspect to it, like the aspect of like the sisterhood and this kind of togetherness and like the bonds that you establish with these girls. I mean, their training is rough. Like, what they're doing is super, super tough. And then by the end of the season, they're breaking down. I mean, it's like any sport, right? Like, it's intense physical activity. it's by the season's end, you got girls that are always sore, always in pain, things like that, and it's like this bonding that is built through that struggle, and that like in that moment, there's only 35 other girls that are understanding what you're going through. You know what I mean? And it's like that is a very, very special bond. And like you see, like I think if I remember it correctly, I remember you see Kelsey at the end of that last game. Shout out to the Green Bay Packers for kicking their ass. Good job, Meg.
Meg's because I had something to do with that.
Meg's from Green Bay, so yeah, you're tangentially responsible for that. So
okay,
yeah.
Sure, that was a hard game for Mike McCarthy to sit through, but
yeah, well, so it's like, but you see them after that game, and I think as soon as like Kelsey gets in the locker room, you see like one girl come up, and then she kind of starts crying a little bit, then another girl, and then it's just like a big pile of like just, and then if there's that raw emotion that's expressed, and that's like any tight knit team of like, I think if you look at like professional, let's say like if we draw a parallel between like that and NFL football, well, you might play with the same guys next year, right? You might have people leaving, but ultimately, like you're still part of the NFL. You're still able to kind of socialize and engage it, and they are too. But I think it's like you don't see the other team like you do, as a player. Like
there's also like a childlike aspect of being on a team like that too, that like you as a girl growing up, or even anybody growing up, of like when you have a slumber party and you have all your friends over and you're doing each other's hair and you're doing each other's makeup and you're getting each other ready for whatever you guys are doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like when women will go, I see this all the time and I agree, where women will put on social media like it's more fun to get together to like get ready for an event than it is to actually go to the event. Like that's the part that's super fun and enjoyable for them, is that they all get to get ready for these games together. You get to do the practice. You get to, have these makeovers like they did in the beginning of the show. You get to have your fitting. Mm-hmm. You get to have your kind of sleepover party that you had when you were in 6th grade. Now as a 27, 28-year-old, 30-year-old, Murph.
He's licking the microphone. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, is like I can see kind of where that would be this like, oh my gosh,
why are you holding him so weird like that?
He's not coming into my lap, but that's the same. Like it's the same. Yeah, and it's reliving kind of those feelings as well, and just again like you're not that you're isolated because you're still living your entire life. You still have a full-time job, et cetera, et cetera. But it's just like you're always coming back to those girls. Like you're training hours every single day. You're traveling with them. You're doing events with them, doing shows with them. Like, and ultimately, like you are choreographed with them. Like you do have to have that bond, like that connection. You know what I mean?
Well, you're like hooking up on a hook line or on a kick line together.
Yeah, you got
to have to touch the other person next to you.
One of the things they were saying is with a lot of those movements, like you have to with a lot of those movements, it's like you have to rely on the other girl. You can't.
You do, because in a kick line, if you like come forward at all or lose balance or something happens to you, roll your ankle, whatever it is, you pull all the other people with you. So like if you move at all, like I remember being in kick lines myself, and if I was next to somebody who would just crank on me, I mean, my kicks are then affected by that too. So you have to work as a team, just as you do in any other sport, to make sure that your kick line's not falling over on one side.
Yeah. Wow. Well, a good show.
DCC.
Yeah. Obviously, like
I love that acronym. I feel like
DCC.
It reminds me of like DC Comics for some reason.
Well, it's just an extra C, so it makes sense. But clearly, we had a lot of thoughts on it and kind of impacted us in some different ways. It was kind of cool. I wish there was maybe like one more episode.
I didn't love the way the last episode ended. I feel like it was very like.
Well, I think you liked it. Well, so like they did. Well, I won't to spoil it, but basically, like one of the ideas was that like they're showing these people as like human beings. Mm-hmm. Like these are normal women.
And I appreciated the last frame.
Sure. The ending was a little bit different for you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know. It's watch it, develop your own. Well, now that you've heard us talk about it,
it's also a show for anybody.
Yes,
it doesn't matter if you like cheerleading or dance. It's seriously a show for anybody.
Yeah. If you just enjoy like
young, old, it doesn't matter.
If you enjoy stories which I mean, I think the vast majority of us enjoy stories. You're gonna like it because they do a really great job of like telling the stories of these girls. Like some of them have like some really interesting like dynamics and family life and stuff like that. And so yeah, I would say I would recommend go watch it if you have not watched it. If you did watch it and you agree with our takes or you have other takes you want to talk about, let us know in the comments. But yeah, any last thoughts on the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders or anything that you want to discuss that we've talked about today? Put you on the spot.
I would say two reminders that I thought, or not reminders, but two things that I thought of are that you never know somebody's story fully. So don't like assume just because somebody, I'll give the instance of like, just because somebody is a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader doesn't mean that there haven't been various experiences that have been painful and challenging for them to go through.
Yeah.
And they talked about that in the show a lot. The second thing that I thought of is that just because you stop an activity or stop something due to an injury or whatever that stop for whatever reason it is, doesn't mean that you can't find new hobbies that you're good at or that you enjoy doing.
Yeah, I think well said. I think that the idea of identity is explored quite a bit. And any former athletes that are listening to this could probably say the same thing. Like, hey, my career in X sport was, 5, 6, 7 years long. And then as soon as I was done, it was like, what do I do? It's because your life revolves around it in so many ways. So I like it. Thanks, man. All right, y'all. Thanks for listening. We got Murph in here for those last frames, so take a look on YouTube to see his cuddly face. Just got groomed today. Look at him. A little haircut.
Stop licking his butt. So.
Yeah, well, can't be perfect. So
that's his new identity.
Oh dear God. Anyways, all right, everybody, have a great rest of your hello, buddy. Have a great rest of your what is it?
July.
Yes, it is July. But you might be listening to this in the future. So go have a good rest of your day.